And so we are now recording, and let me share my screen. Sorry, my Zoom has disappeared.
Come on and Zuma. How many of you watched Zoom as kids?
That was a very good sound. I did.
Yep.
Now
How many of you remember the zip code?
Oh gosh,
No, that's
that would be hard.
Not enough,
barely remember my own zip
coffee
code.
today, Ira. I need more coffee.
02134.
90210. I'm just kidding.
No, the first two zip codes I learned as a kid, 02134 from Zoom and 60609 from Spiegel Catalog, which was where all the gifts on game shows came from.
Thanks.
Oh my goodness.
Back to them
all right, I'm sorry. That was a complete aside, Suzanne.
But I went there. I was going back.
You're there with us. Yep. All right. Well, let's kick this off a bit. Just to kind of remind this group, and I'm sure others hopefully will join in the next few minutes or not, or we'll figure it out. But just to remind this group what we're trying to do here. So this is what we're calling our Digital Promise Adult Learning Edtech community, and we had from many of you, right? And our community is nicely diverse. It has educators, we have researchers, we have product developers, we have investors, we have lots of different people who are interested all in the same issues and challenges of adult education and technology. So what we wanted to do, we had heard from many of you go, how do we connect ourselves? Like we've been doing that. Suzanne and I have been doing the actual kind of connecting, one by one and emails by emails, a little at a time, and then moments of where we've been at conferences and that kind of stuff. So we've done some of that, but had heard from everybody else, how do we do something where we really connect us all so we can really start to dig in deep? And so that's what this community is about. We're trying to do that. And ultimately, the way I think about it is that we want to be a community of, I want to say of action is the right way to, like, we tease a little bit at Digital Promise when people ask us what we do. Some people sometimes describe us as a think tank, and we're like, no, we don't want to be a think tank. We want to be a do tank, right? We want to do stuff. And so that's what I want to see us try to do here with this community too. So we're figuring it out a little bit as we go. So we, including our webinars. So appreciate your patience with that. But kind of the first thing we did, and just to kind of remind you, is we did, we surveyed you in terms of topics, what are our top interests that the group is interested in looking at and diving deeper into. And so the top two were kind of what we have written here, the studying the impact of technology on adult learners. We all know that that's a big deal. We don't know much about this. So that one, rest assured we're going to address that. Some of our friends up in the Portland area are thinking through. Jill, I know you're here somewhere. We're thinking through kind of what might be some good study topics. Let's put it that way. So we kind of that's going to be a working group, and we kind of started on that, but that is not going to be the topic of today. What instead we want to try to do is dive into the second most interested topic, I guess, or the most popular topic, which was this nice broad thing called using technology to support adult learners outside of the classroom, right? So how do we think about that? And so what we're hoping to do is engage some of you in a working group. Now, this may not be, what everybody in the group, especially if there were going to be 27 people here, we were like, do we really have a working group of 27 people, or is it a subset who really want to work with us on this? And so our goal really today is to get us thinking about that topic and kind of pitch a working group and think a little bit about what a working group, how that might work. And so to kind of we wanted to sort of kick off that notion here. So I'll leave it at that, and we'll move on. Suzanne?
Okay, great. So following on our last meeting with the community where we had some speakers to help get us thinking about these topics, we have two speakers today that are both doing really interesting things outside of the classroom. And so they're going to speak for about 10 minutes each, sharing what they do and what they see as the impact on what can be achieved going outside of a traditional classroom. And what we want you all to do is, as you listen to them speak, think about how we might focus this topic, trying to dig a little bit deeper into what we want out of this topic of using technology to support adult learners. So please do use the chat, think about what you do outside the classroom so that we can start thinking through where we might want to direct a working group. So we're going to be, I'll introduce them both, and then Pat will take over. So we have Pat Hughes, who's the Adult Education Director. They, at RSU3 in Maine, they are one of our beacon sites, and they have a virtual learning world for their adult learners. And so Pat will share more about that with you all. And then we have Jessica here, the co-founder and CEO of CellEd, which has focused from the get-go on mobile learning and being able to have learning access anytime, anywhere. So they're a real leader in that area. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing, and Pat will take over and share with you more about her virtual world.
I'm going to give it my best shot. Hello, everybody. I think I'm sharing. Am I sharing now?
Yes, you are.
Awesome.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, awesome. So my name is Pat Hughes. I'm the Adult Education Director here in RSU3, which is in about the center of Maine. So we, just to give you some background, we have won a number of awards, national and international awards for the Virtual Learning Center. We are pretty proud of it, and I'm hoping that I can share with you what we're doing here. So in the beginning, we had a vision statement. In a virtual learning environment, we will effectively guide students of all ages through basic literacy preparation to learn academic, post-secondary, technical, and employability skills needed as future employees following two different career pathways, service and information. So that's what the Virtual Center originally was going to help us do. I'm going to show you a really quick demo of the Virtual Center, so you'll be able to see a little more and have hopefully more questions or less questions.
Pat, if it's playing right now, it's very quiet for us. I hear a small voice, but I'm not sure if that's the voice to be hearing.
Hold on.
Okay.
Can you hear it now? No?
No, I can't. Can anybody?
No, not really, unfortunately.
Okay, well, it's on YouTube, so I'm going to give you the website. I'm not sure why you can't hear it.
Mm-hmm.
I hear it fine, but it might be, it says that the speakers are on and they're on high, so.
Pat, do you want to, if you could drop that link into the chat, I can try to show it from my computer.
Okay.
I can't copy it, so.
Okay, let me move on so I don't, and I will drop it into the chat in a few, while Jessica's speaking. How's that sound? So basically, just to go back one, I guess, I love technology. So basically what we are is we're a 440 square mile school district. We're 11 very small, very rural towns in Western Waldo County, Maine. In 2012, between 68 and 72% of our students have free and reduced lunch, which means they're above the poverty, they're below the poverty level. About 15% of our residents who are 25 and older do not have a high school credential, and the unemployment rate is 11.3, which is much higher than the state average of 9.4. And basically, we live, there's no one town that everybody goes to. They all go to different big towns outside of our area. There's no public transportation. The average person has only about 2/3 of the income of the average person in the United States. It's a very poverty-stricken, very rural area. So what we did is that we wanted to be able to reach our students where they are. We have a home-based family literacy program, which means I send instructors into the homes of our families, and we help them with adult education, and we help them with early childhood education. One of the when we were audited at the state level, one of the problems that our students told the state was that they loved the program, our family literacy program, but they felt totally isolated. Even though we went into their homes, they didn't feel connected to the world at all. So basically the state came to me and said, hey, can you fix rural isolation? Which is kind of hard for us to do, but what we decided to do was create the Virtual Learning Center. There are 4 levels on this Virtual Learning Center. There's a high school level, which you'd see in the video. There's a high school level, which we do our HiSET, which is our GED in Maine, our family literacy programming, and a variety of high school credential type of work that our students can do. Then we have, we collaborated with KVCC, which is Kennebec Valley Community College here in our area, and we created a college level. In that level, we offer free, this is all free to our students, by the way. There's no cost at all to our students. We offer 3 college classes through KVCC. We offer English 031, Math 114, and Psych 101 for all of our students to get a taste of what it's like to learn at the college level. We also are workforce solution site, and we created a Department of Labor level in the center, which means that students are able to go and look for work. They're able to go for the 21st century workforce certificate, which means we teach the 7 base skills needed for successful employment, which includes professionalism, accountability, reliability, adaptability, willingness to learn, and conflict resolution, which is interpersonal. We find that that's basically where our students have the most trouble, is with how to deal with conflict within the workplace. And so that level is there for students to go. They can apply for work, they can create their resumes, they can do a number of things on that site, on that level. We also have an issue in rural Maine that parents that lose their children for whatever reason have to take are court mandated to take a specific class in order to regain custody of their children. And in rural Maine, that's a problem. Usually parents can't get to that class. So in collaboration with Maine Children's Council here in Maine, we created a parents' place. The 4th level is where parents can go to get information about TANF, which is temporary relief for needy families in Maine. They can also find out what it's like for the first day in school for their children. There's some parent resources there. And also they can go to that, if they're mandated, they can go to that actual class virtually and still be able to include for their children, to get their children back. So we basically, it's become a critical and necessary tool for our students to become literate in a digital world. They must become effective consumers, providers, and critics of digital media in all its forms. And thus we hope they do learn to do that. So why it's considered different than distance learning is it's a virtual learning theory. And what that means is that together, we tie the pieces together in an isolated environment for the student to help and support them to become more engaged in their learning, thus persisting and ultimately reaching their short and long-term goals. In this new human interaction and engagement system, in the virtual center, there's avatars, and with that avatar, a person is attached to it. So the person is, even though it's a virtual person, they're still interacting with people, and they find it much different than a distance learning environment. So the question I get all the time is, okay, Pat, that sounds great, but does this really work? So let's find out. Here's some statistics. The center went live in 2012. So in 2010, we served 91 students who completed 3,908 academic hours. In 2011, we served 145 students who completed 6,298 academic hours. In 2012, we served 206 students who completed 10,424 academic hours. In 2013, we served 268 students who completed 28,149 academic hours. And in 2014, we served 279 students who completed 25,453 academic hours. So we have seen an over 1,000% increase in intensity of hours from the lowest hours year to the highest hours year, and over a 250% increase in numbers of students served from the highest to lowest year. So in 2012, we offered 9 classes in the virtual center, and today in 2015, we now offer 19 classes in the virtual center. So some anecdotal evidence has been documented for the center that has at least one success in alleviating rural isolation. In 2013, 2 HiSET math students, one who was in the Spice Family Literacy Program and one who was not, were meeting with the instructor in the virtual center at the same time. They chatted in the center for a long while and decided they wanted to work together in person on their math. With the instructor facilitating, these 2 students met at the home of the student who had no transportation, and they worked together on their math, which is exactly what we were hoping would happen when we did this. So a little more stats just to help. Since 2012, we have numerous students use the center, obviously, and in addition to the hours spent taking various classes, this is above and beyond what they actually take in class. They spent an average of 15 hours, 47 minutes, and 10 seconds each in the center doing a variety of activities. For example, they watch the numerous videos that we have in there. They access the internet in there. They visit libraries and resources. They look for work and basically learning to use the technology needed in the 21st century workplace. We call this the technology class in adult education. And remember, this is extra time that our most in need low-level students are spending working with technology. And remember, the actual class hours are still kept documented by the instructor through the Moodle or Blackboard or whatever platform we happen to be using. We've also been able to document how a student in the center transfers knowledge of a new learned skill to a new learning environment, which is considered a vital workforce thinking skill. This skill is called application in Bloom's taxonomy that serves as the base to a higher order skills or required lower level thinking skill called procedural knowledge, application in Marzano's taxonomy. And that's a prerequisite leading to a higher level or order thinking skills. So how do we do that? Each student learns the teleportation element in the center during the first tutorial. They are then told to look around and find things, thus learning how to move the avatar. There is a do not enter room on the high school level of our center. When this room is encountered, there are 2 options for the student. They don't enter, or they enter and find there's no way out. At this point, the student can either teleport, knowledge that is used in an unknown setting, or they can log out, which shows that the new teleport knowledge has not been used. And we document this, as you can tell by this report. We know exactly what the student does each time they enter a room, and if they teleport or log out. We can actually gauge if a student has learned a new skill and use it in a different environment, which is kind of cool. So this is just the outside of the high school in the virtual learning center. And everyone's welcome to, you can go to the center. You're more than welcome to go in it. We can give you a guest login and you can move around, look around. We're more than happy to answer any questions you might have. And I will send that link to Suzanne so she can send it to you guys. It's a YouTube video and it discusses all four parts of the center. So that's it. That's all I got. So you want me to stop sharing?
Yes, that would be fine. Sorry, it took me a minute to unmute myself
That's okay.
when you were done. So thank you very much, Pat. At this point, if anyone has any questions for Pat, we can ask them now. You can put them in the chat or unmute, and then we'll have Jessica share. So any questions?
I have 2 questions. This is Vinod from Learning Upgrade in San Diego. My first question was, how many hours do the learners spend onboarding at your center before they can be effective at home, effective away from the center? Because we're dealing with this a lot in San Diego with virtual learning ESL, which is how, they're spending a couple hours to try to figure out all the learning management systems, and then they're off on their own. And the second question is, how many staff is needed to support 270 students who are doing virtual learning?
Yeah, to answer the first question, we actually give virtual learning demos before the student actually goes into the center. Here we sit down with our students and we tell them how to maneuver the avatar, and we give them time in the center so they can learn how to do what they're supposed to be doing in there. And we have something that we call it we have it's like they search for things. We have like a pirate ship in the center, or we have a talking Mustang, or we have different things that they can go and look for. So as they learn to maneuver the avatar, they learn what they can do, because you can't really have anybody do it unless they do it themselves. There's no other way to learn how to maneuver avatars and so on and so forth unless you do it. The second thing is each staff member in the virtual center, I have at least, I'd say 16 instructors at any variety of time, depending on what classes that we're offering at that time. And they tell me how many students they want in the classroom. They take up to about 15 to 20 at a time, because they can have asynchronous classes as well as synchronous. So they can say, hey, let's meet in the center at such and such a time, and we're going to do a group discussion, or we're going to do a group activity. But they can also have it so the students can go and work at their own pace, because we don't want anyone to feel. What I will tell you is that in the center, there is a rule that students who take these kind of classes, these virtual classes, they have to master 80% of the content of the material that they're working with. I know 80% sounds high, and I get that a lot from a lot of people. The reason that we do it is that we expect in the workplace that most people will have 80, most employers want 80% of the work done. So we're trying to train them to at least do 80% of the work. So does that answer your question? Kind of.
Yeah, that helps a lot. Thanks.
Great. And Carissa has a question. Can you say more about who developed the online space and how it is updated? And what is an example of a course?
Sure. When we first started this process, we looked everywhere in the United States, and I'm not kidding. All right, we work very close with the IT department here in the district. So first you have to develop a really good relationship with your IT department. And they were willing to take on this process with me. And that was just the relationship between us, or just because they wanted to try something that's different. We looked everywhere we could in the United States. We couldn't find any virtual learning educational place. So we went to a group called Reaction Grid, and it was a small business down in Florida it was run by a retired NASA engineer, and he was creating virtual meeting places for people, for different businesses and stuff. And and when we told him what we'd like to do, he thought this was a great project for him to take on. So he created the very first level, which is the high school level, for us. He did all the coding and everything for us. We paid him buku bucks, and it was a lot of money at the time, to do this for us. What happened is that one of our IT people here was extremely interested in technology, and he was willing to take on the center as a project for him to learn, with the district's permission and approval, to create the other 3 centers. So we have somebody here that is the person that probably in the country at this point that knows how to run this type of a virtual learning system, and he does all the updates for us. He does all the corrections for us. He's the one that helps us manage the system. So we're very lucky in that respect. An example of a course, at the high school level, we have a digital photography class. We have environmental science. We have biology. We have a basic math class, and we have some SPICE, which is our family literacy program, individual lessons and courses for our family literacy students. In the college level, we have English 031, MAT 114, which is technical math, and Psych 101 for them. And in our Department of Labor section, we have the virtual learning, the 21st century workforce certificate, which is the 7 modules that it's based on a industry competency pyramid, and the bottom 7 are the 7 modules that our students work through for employability skills, plus the parent class in the parent level, which is run by DHHS, which is Department of Health and Human Resources. Does that help?
Okay, great. So any more questions? There's no more in the chat if anyone wants to jump in. Looks like Bob does.
I have a question. This is Carissa. I'm wondering, since you developed it, it sounds like several years ago, and technology has changed so much so quickly, do you think something like a Google Classroom could meet a lot of the features that you have in your platform?
Yeah, I actually think it probably could. What we found is that as we created code that is based on a certain platform, of course, sometimes Google Chrome won't support that platform anymore, or Firefox doesn't want to do that anymore. So at this point, we're trying to change everything over to HTML, and that takes time, and we want to make sure that it still runs, and that so we have like a sandbox that we kind of play in, which we're trying to transfer all the code from Jive, which is what it's in now, to HTML. And what my staff does do, since sometimes if a certain browser isn't going to provide the service that we need, I will have them meet in Google Chat or Google Hangouts and stuff. And so it does seem to work without the all the flashiness of the virtual center. So I think that it probably might.
Oh, thank you. We're about to roll it, Google Classroom, out across the state of Rhode Island to all adult ed programs. So
I hope they use it. It's awesome.
Oh, good. We'll keep watching how you do it and carry it over. Thanks.
Awesome.
Yeah, and great thinking about how we can reach more learners in different ways. So Bob's question is here now.
Okay.
It sounds like the virtual learning system is a meeting place for students. How does the VR environment support instruction on content areas, say literacy? Are the courses face-to-face and the VR environment engagement and communications between students and instructors?
Yes, the virtual learning place is a place for students to meet. Remember, there is no one place for our very rural students in the 440 square miles for them to meet. So the virtual classroom or the virtual center has become that meeting place for people to meet in, instructors. My staff has virtual learning hours, so they actually are in the center at certain times. We've built it into their regular classrooms time, so they're actually able to be in there and engage with students as they work through the process. As far as it support instruction, again, it's because that avatar is a person. So if a student can't, there's no snow days up here anymore, and there's no, if you can't make it to class at that specific time, it doesn't mean you get out of doing the work that you missed in class. We've kind of eliminated the issue for transportation and childcare, which is two big issues here in Maine. So we've kind of gotten rid of those. So students can, if they can't meet in the Google Hangouts when the students are all meeting or the class is meeting, that's going to be okay, because there's going to be something in there for them to do that for them to stay up with the class, so they don't have to miss class and then start all over again. It helps with retention, it helps with interaction, and it helps students feel like that they're part of a group, which peer learning is extremely important for adults. If they see other adults in there doing the same thing, they feel more supported and they're more apt to stay with the class and go through it. What I will tell you is that we've noticed basic literacy classes, the reading and the math, those students need a little extra live help. We encourage them to come to our site at least twice a month, because they just need that. The higher level math students or the higher level reading students have a little less issue with the virtual learning than the basic level students do. But we just encourage them and we request them to come in and meet with us so we can make sure that they can stay up with the work. Does that help?
Okay, great. Any other questions? We want to give Jessica some time too, but these have been great questions to thinking through the impact. Okay, well, so now we'll turn to Jessica, and just a reminder, she's the co-founder and CEO of CellEd, and she will share with you mobile learning outside the classroom.
You need to unmute, Jessica.
I wondered why I was talking to myself there again. Good. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
All right, and I'll put it in present mode. All right, great. Well, thank you. For those of you I haven't met, I'll give you a little bit of background on CellEd. And for those of you that I have had a chance to talk a little bit about, or you've met some of my team, hopefully I'll have a little bit of a different take, because I'm excited that this is intended to be a working group in some ways that we could collaborate together to work on some of our hardest challenges that we face in trying to serve adults. So what I'm going to start with is a bit of an introduction here. I am the CEO and co-founder of CellEd, but I represent a team of dynamic teachers, community service providers, and technologists who are really gathered together to try to figure out how to solve a major gaping hole in the adult education market, serving those who are the hardest to reach, those who fall not only below the poverty line, but who also face challenges in ever reaching a classroom. In fact, we started by serving those who couldn't read in their first language and whose basic access to technology was only in the form of a mobile phone. So in that, we started again as a research project at UCLA in partnership with Central Latino Literacy. And the idea there is, well, if we could provide training via text messaging on a basic phone, not a phone with internet, we could really bridge a gap currently in the marketplace. And we just asked a simple question: can we teach adults who can't read in their first language how to via texting? And we found after a 2-year randomized control trial that not only could we teach these enormously resourceful adults, mostly women, how to read in their first language, we learned more about what they were needing and asking for. And from there, we launched CellEd in 2014. The piece of the puzzle that most people ask us about is, why would you try to teach via texting? And it's very simple. I've always been in the field of providing access to technology resources, and yet not because technology is a solution, merely because it's a tool of access. And again, we're trying to reach those who basically have never had access to a classroom or formal education, or very little. And the fact that so many people have a mobile phone, we know 98% of people have a mobile phone, 31% at this point are a smartphone. We know that that is an access device. What we discovered in our randomized control trial, and subsequently with our other learners that we've been able to work with, that there was a couple of pieces of the puzzle that access to education, learning, self-directed over a mobile phone gave something that our learners didn't have access to before. 24/7 access to a skill, a concrete skill in a few minutes that they could access any time of day in an automated way, that it was completely self-directed. It would be in those moments of time that they could find in a day, whether it was a break at work or dropping off the kids. And it also bypassed all the traditional barriers. We've heard it before around childcare, or even paying for a class, or finding a class that was even relevant. The idea that you could get a concrete skill in so short a time, it just meant that in a few minutes in that day, you could actually find real results. We also base all of our content that we create real life scenarios. It's really what you'll hear out if you're sitting at a cafe, if you're in a job interview, if you're trying to apply for a job, if you're registering to vote for the first time, if you're talking to a doctor. We really base it in real life interactions that are very contextualized to the experience our learners will be experiencing in their own lives. And we always tell people that we're two-way. It's a two-way street. We receive texts back, and we give texts two-way with our learners. And the last note is we have a live coach on the other end for that human touch, because especially for those who haven't had access to classroom, there's a lot of confidence challenges and feeling barriers essentially to the skills they think or know they want. And having just that option of a live coach via texting or a phone call has made a big difference for a lot of folks, and made a difference for us, because now we can have this way of learning in real time what is working and what is not. I think the piece that we've learned also is that our partners, those who serve a large number of folks who are lacking essential skills, access to both language, literacy, and job skills, they need a tool as well to communicate with their home care workers or their frontline staff or their population they aim to serve with basic education, adult education. So we recently developed and have launched a tool, a training tool, and a learning management system, a complete mobile solution, we're calling it, for our partners to be able to track all the use of the learners on the system, the workers on the system, and to create that two-way communication via texting and other. We also have a flexible course builder, and I'll talk a little bit more about the power of being able to adapt the content in real time to serve the needs, in particular, of the learners that we're working with. But I thought, because we're a working group, that it would be great to get into what keeps us up at night and what continues to keep us up at night on the CellEd team and through our networks of partners. We're here in a combined effort to really tackle the digital divide. It is enormous and often not talked about. And I have to be an advocate for talking about real access and use because I am a born and raised and a product of Silicon Valley. And all too often I hear about this notion that technology solves all these problems, when in fact, often it's merely a tool, and it's usually the humans and the problem and the context and all these pieces that come together in a very complex web that allow us to even begin to tackle some of the greatest challenges that we face. So we talk about the digital divide a lot because most people assume people have internet access, or they assume there's a computer at home. And we find that by and large, really none of our users have either. And again, knowing that barrier is real for most people in the world. But they do have a mobile phone. Designing mobile first, an idea that even for those who have a mobile phone, it may be their only access to the internet because it's a smartphone in some cases. Being really cognizant of what it takes to design and deliver bite-sized bits of skill building and information to folks who would otherwise not have access to internet and the information that most people who are technologists and content providers have access to. So there's a bit of that divide. I also talk about the mobile phone a lot because we know there's over 8 billion mobile connections in the world. And we know 97% of the 98% of people that have phones actually use it to text. And most of them open their text. So we already know that that's almost an immediate access, and it really bridges a lot of the divides. Now, what I also have to tell people is a lot of things that you can do or text, you can do so much more than simply texting a short strand. And that's a piece of the puzzle. We can also send smart media, we can do full lessons and videos, etc. on messaging. So it's a real opportunity for communicating and engaging and also disseminating information. I'm going to turn to the opportunity divide because that's really why we're here. The lack of access to the digital opportunities often equates to lack of access to information. A lack of access to the opportunities that most people need every day. And it's really bridging that divide between the information have and have-nots. That's a major goal for CellEd. A piece of the puzzles that so many folks that we work with, in fact, originally, I spent a lot of time working with households that live below 10,000 US dollars a year, and that's 71% of the globe. In the US, we find we work mostly with households, over 60% really live below 50,000 and far below that. And money is tight, so we have to be very aware of the fact that classes cost, and it costs time and money. And that's a lot of opportunity cost for those who already are typically working 1 or 2 or maybe 3 jobs and are often unsecure jobs at that. So that's a piece of the puzzle. We keep trying to figure out how to kind of address that opportunity and access divide and how to pair our content with actual jobs and outcomes that would make a real difference. The hardest one, and possibly the most important one for us, is the learning to listen piece. I talk about this quite a bit because at the end of the day, when I looked a few years ago for content to serve the challenges that our learners were facing, there wasn't a lot of content out there. A lot of the content out there had been maybe formulated in classrooms that were meant to teach to certain standards and certain skills. But when it came to facing the challenges that most of our learners faced in daily life, having not had much access or success in classrooms, it really wasn't geared to what were the key pieces you need to make the difference. And that's why I think there's a lot of bias, unintended or not, around technology developers and content developers around how different our understanding of the need for content is, depending on our skill level when we enter it. So if a lot of folks are coming with college or higher education and have gone through a certain system, for example, are they really tailoring the learning and the knowledge for our learners that may be needing very different skills? So there's a lot of work learning to listen, and I think that's most of the job that we're doing now, is trying to learn to listen and then adapt our content in real time and our technology to meet more and more of our learners at the end. And I think we're here for our learners. We call it learner-centered. And we are also very much committed to our partnerships. And this is another reason why we want to continue to be on these calls, because we know that most of you have been in this field for a lifetime. And we know there's so much information and sharing that we can do so that we can literally try to bridge some of these serious gaps and work together. So we are open to that, and want people to know that CELED is a collaborator first, and happy to share what we've learned, and absolutely willing to learn from your best practices, and hope this crew can continue to do some more. But I wanted to open up for questions and see what was intriguing, if any, of what I've talked about, and I'll start there.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. And that was really great to help us start thinking about what are those issues with using technology outside the classroom that we would want to study. So if anyone has questions, feel free to unmute, or you can type them into the chat. So we'll give a minute or two for that.
Jessica Vinod here. Hi. I think these two presentations fantastic back to back, because what I'm seeing a lot is I want to know what you think about how this new type of mobile-based learning, can fit in with, what I would call the more traditional adult ed, which has been using, LMSs and computers and things like that. So, how have you seen, when you're working with people, you were talking about developing your own LMS, how do you fit in with that world and yet provide this totally new platform, which is mobile?
Well, yes. Thank you for that question. Well, Vinod, I think we try to enter the scene where the gaps are, where the pain point is for our partner. A lot of times it's because there's a wait list for the classes, or even more, it's people need to have supplemental. So the blended learning challenge that most face. So we can be a kind of a natural complement and not a replacement. And for those who will never have access, in the case of some of our partners in rural and other areas of reach, we are the only option, and can be used as a standalone. So it's really meant to either be a complement for what we see in the blended learning ideal sense. And a couple things that we get from our feedback, because we do get a lot of feedback on what works and doesn't. It helps students to do a lot of their learning out of class and in a fraction of the time. So it really accelerates what normally would be happening. And we have those studies to back up some of that growth. For those who would not have had an access, well, clearly they went from having zero to access not only to an arm of learning, but a way to get feedback on what more that user, that learner, would like to have available to them.
Great, thank you, Jessica. And I was typing in the chat, but now I'll just say it out loud. So great question from Dana. And if any of you have any other overall questions that you're considering, please do type them in the chat, because I'll make a record of them as we move to the next phase of figuring out what it is that the direction of the working group. And so that's perfect, Dana. You got us started on that. And any more specific questions for Jessica at this time before I share my screen and Patty shares our next steps?
Okay, then.
Yes. So I'm getting the share screen going. Okay.
So
Do you
So
want this
yeah,
slide,
so
Patty? Okay.
do I want what? Yeah, that slide's good.
Okay.
So Jessica and Pat, thanks so much for just sort of setting us up in terms of thinking through just this larger question of, you know, how do we provide instruction and support for adult learners outside of the classroom? One of the things, and I have this slide here talks about something we call the challenge-based. So challenge-based learning is something that we do a lot at Digital Promise and advocate a lot among students, but then we use it ourselves as a way to really think through challenges, right? Like and we want them to be big, important challenges. In this particular case, we sort of think about the, you know, this is a big question. How do we provide? I wrote down, how might we provide quality instruction outside of the class? Well, quality outside of the class instruction for adult learners. How to explain this? Ultimately, what we want to try to do with this working group is think through like what might be answers to this larger challenge. But I think where we want to start is something is in this notion. This is what I call it. What's the state of of learning outside the classroom, right? There's a lot of ways that individuals of us, and you can sort of see it in what Pat had to say in terms of what she learned, saying, you know, nowhere in the country are they doing anything like virtual learning, and she's probably one of the few that can give us some instruction, some ideas and answers around how's it working so far, right? And she probably has a million other questions to add to that. Same with Jessica. And I just know enough about the rest of what you guys are doing that there's just a lot that we as collectively as a group don't really know about the state of learning outside of the classroom. So what we'd like to try to do is start with here is use what we're calling this challenge-based learning framework to dive in, understand what the state is, and then how do we identify actual challenges and then put together kind of proposed actions and solutions to dive in deeper. So the challenge-based framework kind of works this way. At first, the first step is to kind of engage with the whole topic. And at that engaged level, we do a lot of asking questions, lots and lots of them. So some examples might be, and I wrote them just kind of out of what you guys were talking about, like, where are those students? There are a lot of, we know that there are rural students. We know that there are urban students. We know that there are transportation issues. We know sort of all of that, right? But how do we ask that question? And then we're going to come back to trying to figure out what those answers are. Many other questions came up for me. You know, what really are their needs? What kind of supports might they need? What kinds of access do adults really have? Blah, 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 blah. So the engage phase is really a questioning phase. And one of the things you want to make sure you do is not jump to solutions before we ask enough questions. And there are certain kinds of questions that are above the surface. And then or that just kind of surface questions, the ones that we probably all ask. And then in the midst of this, and we've found this many times in the challenge base, you then get to sort of these below the surface. What are the key kinds of questions that make us think through different ways of attacking a solution than you might if you're just staying at the surface? So the engage phase is to asking a lot of questions. The investigate is then let's go through and actually see what kinds of answers we can come up with for those particular questions. And then the third is kind of acting, and the acting is what kinds of solutions, what kind of proposed solutions. And in our case, it might be what kind of other research might we do, what other pilot programs might we think about, what other, you know, I don't even know what's going to come out of this. But what I'm hoping to do is to sort of guide the working group through this challenge-based framework and really think through, I don't know, and guide us through it and see what we come up with is kind of where I'm going with this. The hope was, and yeah, thank you, Suzanne, you read my mind. It's awesome. what we'd love to do is ask for folks to join this working group. And as I said kind of at the beginning, I don't know that it's a 27-person working group, but it can be if it wants to be. So anybody who would like to engage in this with us would be great. What we think is that there'd be some virtual sessions, not necessarily big group like this, but we do some more webinar where and I may bring some of our colleagues who are a little bit better at facilitating the challenge-based learning framework. I may bring them to sort of guide us through a couple of sessions where we ask all these questions. And then there may be some individual work between those sessions in which we divide and conquer around answering some of those questions. And then what our hope was that sort of by the December timeframe, we'd kind of wrap up this engage and investigate place where we could, even if Digital Promise could, and with you guys as co-authors and as a working group, we maybe would publish something that said, hey, here's what we think the state of the state is, and here's some important questions that we think we need to answer. And then out of that, also have some recommendations for the types of things we might do. That then we could go and talk to funders about, et cetera. And then that's something that we're thinking about in 2018. So I think I invite anybody who has any questions about this, I invite those questions. And then I think what we're going to end up doing here, given our timing, we talked about this at the beginning. There was a few of us on here that we were saying, well, maybe we need to do a part 2 of this in September. So it's probably what's going to happen. So I just sort of set this up as hey, here's what we want to do. Maybe have a bit of a challenge-based learning. Let's do the questioning piece of this, and let's engage together. I'm not sure. I haven't quite figured out exactly what the September piece of this, but this is the notion. And so if anybody, number one, have questions. Number two, if you're interested and want to raise your hand and be a part of that, that would be great. You can tell me that now. You can email me, etc. Does all this make sense? Hopefully. You can unmute, feel free. There's not that many of us.
It's an excellent framework because it allows us to surface a broad variety of issues, and the prioritization, it'll depend in large part, I think, on how much time and resource the working group has as everybody's running some other program. The ability to prioritize a handful of surfaced issues and dig deeper on them sounds like a solid outcome of this kind of framework.
Great.
Yeah, I think it sounds great. I mean, one thing that I've been thinking about is how does the product or whatever we come up with, how can that be used as a tool to reach people in adult education, kind of both practitioners and people in positions of leadership that maybe are not as bought into the idea or don't understand the idea of adult ed and technology. I think that will be kind of a critical piece, as we move forward with it. But I think it's a great, it's a great thing to do. And I think the timing makes a lot of sense with things like X Prize going on and other stuff.
Yep.
And I think a lot about access for adults. Like, how do they, if you're a low literate adult, you're not going to class, how do you even know anything exists to help you? So I was riding the public bus the other day, and there was some kind of, reader on the bus that you could access the Bellingham Public Library on the bus somehow. So I was just thinking, oh, well, what if you could access a literacy app? So just ways that low literate adults could find out that these things exist so that they could access them. And also be kind of fun once we, what are the high quality products out there? Because it's not one size fits all. So maybe for teachers, but then you'd have to go to conferences, that there could be, or is there, and I don't even know about it, some kind of central site where teachers, providers could go and say, okay, if I have really low literate people who don't have an internet connection, this would be good. If I have this program might be good.
It's a lot of what COABE says it does. There's also the links community. online, but you know, by no means are those comprehensive.
Right. It's almost like shout outs in individual communities, radio ads. I don't know. I guess it's marketing.
We're hoping, my hope is that we're going to, like, some of what we're going to learn from the X Prize and some of this city work that they're doing will inform some of that for us. Because I'm curious to see word of mouth and how that goes.
Right. There'll be a big hullabaloo once the cities start adopting the programs, because right now it's in the test cities. And then it's just more people realize that a problem exists.
Mm-hmm. What else? I think we're almost out of time here. But I guess look for more from us for September. But again, if you are, sounds, Dana, you said count me in already, and Pat did too. That's awesome in the chat. But if you know, do let us know. I mean, I'd love the more voices we have in this, I think the better. Meaning, you know, that we've got educators, we've got researchers. Like, the way we can think about this from all of our perspectives, I think will be really, really important. And I do think we have a lot to contribute, in particular in this area. So I think I personally look forward to it. So.
Okay, and so I will be sending out an email with the video to everybody who registered. We knew that some people couldn't come. August is always hard. In there, I will recommend that people watch it if they weren't here live, and then we'll share the September date where we can pick up and dig into more questions and figure out that to start in that engage stage. If you have questions in the meantime, send them to us. But a task will be between now and September is to be continuing to think of those questions. And I have recorded everything that's in the chat. And so that you don't need to worry that that'll get lost when we close the Zoom. So, any final questions or thoughts from you all?
Thanks for organizing this.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks Jessica and Pat for helping us set this all up.
Yes, thank you all so much.
Thank you again.
So,
all right.
Great.
Bye, everyone.
Great.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.